way live from Black Pearl Studios, where we talk about Indiana politics from the left side of things. Y'all, I could go into a rant and talk about how trifling Republicans are and talk about how Holcomb mad he didn't get the answer he wanted on whether or not he can dispatch the groper attorney here. All of it's a big mess. Y'all always talk about Democrats being some mess. That's a mess. That's a whole lot of mess, but we're not going to do that tonight. Because real talk, I got my girl on the show. Y'all have no idea. When I was sitting on that board, on the board of Stonewall, and as president of Stonewall, and things were always stressing me out a little bit, I know I could always holler at my girl. She, would bring common sense to the conversation. Didn't always want that. I wanted to vent and rant. She wouldn't let me. But more importantly, I don't know if you guys know it or not, but when I was sick last year and I was admitted into the hospital, I don't know if you are familiar with where District 8 is, but she's got it written in the, if you look at the map, you see it's down in southern Indiana. She was at the hospital the first night I was in the hospital. She was there. She was there listening, taking notes, giving advice, telling too much is what she was doing. Telling way too much to have my whole family all panicked out. Like, we need to have this test, this test, this test. But yo, I'm like, y'all, you remember that, right?
Yeah. You better be checking her D-dimer every hour.
Yes. And I was like, you know what? No, we're not scoping. We're not looking. We're not. End up having to have all them things anyway. But one of the reasons why I share that story is because that's who Thomasina is. That's who she is. She's a real down home, down earth, kind of person, kind of woman who looks out for her people. And it didn't matter that she was maybe an hour away from me. She came to see about me and was there the night that I was admitted for the first time into the hospital for anything other than an elective surgery. So, y'all, give it up for my friend. Someone who knows way too much about my medical situation than anyone is allowed to know. No, I'm just kidding. My girl, Hope in 8. I love her logo. Thomasina Marsili, running for Congress in District 8. What's up?
How you guys doing? What's going on, Indiana?
Man,
how is everybody?
Everybody's cool. They're excited about you. Every time I go somewhere, do you know Thomasina? Have you met Thomasina? And I'm like, I do know Thomasina. You have people hyped all over the state about what you're bringing to this congressional race. Tell the people, right? Tell the people who you are and where you come from. Now, look, you was on a couple years ago. We know a little bit about your background, but share a little bit more. And I'm gonna see if I can get some singing out you earlier tonight than we did.
That was our sound check, wasn't it?
Yeah. I'm gonna get some more.
My name is Thomasina Marsili. I grew up in rural southern Indiana in Spencer County. Shout out to Spencer County. That's right. I have a long history of work in this Hoosier state. I'm a lifelong Hoosier. I was born here, I was raised here, and I stayed here. I've got over 30 years experience in emergency management because we used to not have 911 in rural areas. So I literally started with emergency response at 9 years old. We had a emergency rapid response team that worked with all of our farmers. So growing up in a rural area, you learned quickly how to take care of people. I have over 20 years corporate management experience. I have a cognitive research psychology degree. That means I don't ask you how you feel when you sit on a couch. I can determine how your mind works by the way that you think and the language that you use.
Oh, shoot. Anyway,
I know, right?
You're not telling
I'm not gonna shrink you.
Okay, you're not gonna tell any of my secrets, are you?
No, absolutely not, baby. They go to the grave.
So, you know what? You mentioned a couple of things I want to hit off on right away. And one of the things that I've noticed, like when you and I have to talk on the phone or we're having a conference call, you actually have to step outside of your home, right? To get good reception.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we are seeing up and down rural Indiana is that, especially during this time of COVID and kids having to stay home from school, network connectivity, high-speed internet to our rural communities is lacking. Can you talk about how,
to say the least?
Yeah.
To say the least.
Can you talk about? Okay, so and I'm seeing in rural Indiana, unfortunately, your network bandwidth. Oh, my network bandwidth is low. Oh my goodness. There we go. Can you talk about the difficulties in getting network connectivity out there in rural Indiana? And AT&T, don't mess with me today.
Right, right. So, I mean, a lot of the issues are this. People are fighting to get 5G in Marion County, and we barely have 3G in the majority of the 8th district. If you look at the map behind me, that orange that's in the state of Indiana, which is actually geographically 20% of Indiana, it's 7,100 square miles. 80% of it doesn't even have 3G. Doesn't even have 3G. And when I'm on the campaign trail, I have to carry 2 cell phones, and there's still parts with 2 different networks. And there are still parts of the district that don't have service for either of those cell phones. So imagine being a mother or a father who has a child in these rural areas, and you can't even have cell service to call anybody. And in most of these areas, phone services, AT&T won't repair phone services because it's just non-existent anymore, right? Landlines. The best thing that I've seen is Smithville, who has taken that stimulus package and is going into Greene County and Davies County. They're hitting it hard. They're trying to get service to these kids who now have to have school online, who had to finish school online. Because it's not even about having a bus that has Wi-Fi in the parking lot. Some of these students don't have transportation to get into a town to get that service. So their service is nothing. We've done nothing with broadband. And we absolutely have to bring it up to all 92 counties, not just getting tablets to students, but getting Wi-Fi to students that actually work. Something that is on higher than a 3G or 4G network in order to get to these, classroom areas where you have live chat. If you're going to have live chat and Zoom meetings, a Zoom meeting takes up about 5 gigs. If you work off of a Verizon hotspot, you get 10 gigs before it starts running slow and you can't use it anymore. So that's 1 day. That's 2 hours max for 10 gig. That's what they have. So they have 2 days out of 30-day cycle billing to have school. We've got to change that. We absolutely have to change that.
Absolutely. And do you think from a federal level we can kind of mandate what that looks like, moving it down into the state level? Is that something that we think we can accomplish?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's going to be a mandate. I mean, if we don't get enough funding to get rural broadband, right? People like John Hurley in Spencer County, who's running for that great Indiana House seat down there.
Yes, one of my favorites.
His students can't be reached. Ian Gamroth, who's in the Gibson, Posey, Vandenberg area, right? He can't, in Pike, he can't get to his students. He's another teacher that's working. Mm-hmm. Who is really robbed are the children. Yeah. It's not about the parents who are going to be using it for XYZ. And when we get into these situations, it's not just about this pandemic. This pandemic has unfortunately shown us what happens when our people who are underserved become isolated.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And they're not even getting the right information. I saw a young lady today talk about how, she doesn't want to wear masks because, it's damned if you do and damned if you don't. I got to adjust you again. I'm sorry because my bandwidth is acting up. But it was damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I'm like, how are you getting this information and why are you, sharing this misinformation? But that speaks to what you're talking about, which is when people are isolated, they're not getting quality information, and it's not helping that the loudest mouth with the biggest bullhorn is talking mess, right?
Right. Well, and one thing that we can absolutely show is that when you live in a rural area, even if Dish is available or DirecTV is available, it doesn't mean that you can afford it, or that you're in a non-wooded area where you can receive a signal. Yeah, right. Yeah. But one thing that you can guarantee is that if everybody had the same speed of broadband, where you could reach and you could research and you could see TV, right? You could live stream it. That's things that people don't understand. If you don't have bandwidth, you can't live stream. One live stream news cycle, it's the same thing for a Zoom meeting. So you can maybe withstand one news station cycle in a month. One. And that's just regular news. So what you have left out in a lot of these areas is radio. So if the radio station doesn't have regular news or isn't giving people the news to date on totals, and it's more for music, right? Mm-hmm. They're not going to know, and the only place they're going to get information is from Facebook.
Mm-hmm. And you know that information isn't disseminated, right? See, AT&T is getting on my nerves because they keep messing with my bandwidth right now, and I'm not in rural Indiana, and so one minute you're small, and the next minute you're big, and it's like I'm making people dizzy, and I do apologize for that, but you know I really had nothing to do with that. I'm trying to do my best to make sure that I keep you on, and that people can see your face because you are a lovely woman. Now that being said, well, I mean, you know, game recognized game, you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, infrastructure just seems to be one of those things that Washington isn't all that focused on. They seem to be focused on a whole lot of other things. But also with that, we talk about, you know, the Green New Deal and how bringing alternative energy to our state would be a better option than some of this, you know, traditional, you know, finite energy source. Talk about your stance on how we need to bring greater renewable energies to the state of Indiana.
You know, we already have that in Indiana. We just need to employ that in Indiana. One of the great things that the coal mines will leave is the dump and go stations that they have. Something that we need in the crossroads of America. So the thing about coal is on rivers, right? Mm-hmm. And that is also a green way to transport things. And one thing that we can add to that is hemp processing. Right? And we don't have enough hemp processing stations across the United States. Well, we're the crossroads of America. So we can reach through our rivers and through our river system. We can have people from all over bringing that hemp, dumping it off, and having it processed here. That's an easy manufacturing. Nothing would really have to change. And it would bring buildings for our union trade, our journeymen to build, our IBEW to wire, our, you know, from up and down the ballot on our labor unions, they would have contracts to be able to build those buildings, and we would have labor to be able to work in those areas, farm labor, union labor. So, go ahead.
No, keep talking.
You know, I mean, and when we look at the New Deal, one thing that is part of the Green New Deal is that light rail, right? Mm-hmm. So that infrastructure for light rail to go through. Well, the unfortunate part about the Green New Deal is that it completely cuts out rural America. You can't have a light rail that goes across the United States and only hits the big cities. Mm-hmm. What you have to have is infrastructure that goes through these rural areas, so that if you live in Gibson County and you want to work in Vandenberg, you should be able to do that. And if you live in these rural areas like Davies and Greene, and you want to get to Indianapolis or you want to get to Evansville where the industry is, you should be able to do that and still live in these rural areas. So that is one thing that I'm keeping my eye on the light rail proposal, because once again, we failed rural areas and cut them out. This is what happened with 69. Right, when 69 bumped through.
But I gotta ask real talk. I mean, don't you want your light rail to be where there's a population? So if you have
absolutely.
Okay, so I mean, you're saying hit the county hubs? Is that what you're saying versus not hitting the counties at all?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It needs to go. It doesn't need to bypass it. It needs to go through it. Like, for instance, what we have with Amtrak, where it goes through Dyer, Indiana, and all of those rural areas. Those actually used to be very large stations, right? And when you have a large station, you're not just having a place for rural populations to reach larger populations. You're having places of employment, right? So you have people that do maintenance of these stations. You have places to set up shops because people will stop, right, and buy things. And it's a trickle-down effect that helps the entire economy.
Oh, okay, good. Hey, Indiana's own Dana Black, turn left. Please forgive me. AT&T is clowning me. I'm sorry. I'm doing the best that I can. I know we're making you dizzy by moving in, moving out, moving in, moving out. There's not a whole lot I can do about that. I want to make sure that you can hear and see her. So that's why I'm trying to make the adjustments on the fly. If I had a real engineer, it would be easier, but I don't. It's just me. So I do apologize again. Technology, some things I can fix, some things I can't. The bandwidth that's coming into the building, I cannot fix. But please understand, Thomasina is real talk here. Another thing that seems to be, a big concern, and COVID has definitely brought out that, and you were one of the ones that explained to me how we have counties that don't have adequate healthcare facilities. You were the one that explained to me how sometimes it takes, an hour for an EMT to get to where the emergency is, and then another hour to get them to a healthcare facility. Talk about what it means for you when we say affordable healthcare for all.
So affordable healthcare for all doesn't just mean having insurance available. It means having facilities available. So, for example, during this COVID experience that we're having, in the place where I live, right, you are dispatched to, let's say, my house, and Cataract volunteer fire department would be the one that would respond to that first before Owen County EMS, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say that Owen County EMS is on 2 separate runs, and we have 2 ambulances that work during the shift. So they're gone. They're unable to respond because they're already responding to another emergency. And Cataract Fire volunteer fire department, because 7 out of 10 of our EMS in Indiana is volunteer. So our Cataract volunteers show up to my house and give me oxygen until Owen County can make it there and be stable. We don't know how long that is because we don't know how long the run is. Now, the great thing about our EMS in this rural area, they will dispatch another station should that take too long, right? Mm-hmm. But what happens when Eric Holcomb doesn't have enough masks for the rural counties?
Which he doesn't.
He doesn't. And then he absolutely doesn't have enough masks for our volunteer stations, right? So time lapse. And even at that, if I get into a bus, which is what we affectionately call an ambulance when you work on an ambulance, if I get on a bus, they're going to give me the option to ride 45 minutes away to Bloomington IU or ride 57 minutes away to Regional South, which is in Terre Haute, or ride 45 minutes away to Putnam. So for me to even get to a hospital via an ambulance, it's going to take 45 minutes. And this is what I'm talking about. There is no substation. And it's all over. If you go to Clay County in South, and you need to take them either to the north end of the county or to Vigo County, we're hit with the same thing. It's because we don't have adequate health service in these rural counties. As Dr. Myers has said before, we live in healthcare deserts. Deserts.
And that's unfortunate because you would think that some of the funding that our tax dollars are going to would make sure that we have what we need versus making sure corporate America is getting their adequate tax breaks. I meant to hit you with this and I forgot and I apologize, but it all ties in together, right? I'm disturbed that that the utility companies are trying to hit us up for their lost revenue. I mean, that to me is just like the most asinine thing that I've ever heard, in the fact that you want to charge me more for services that you haven't actually provided me. Talk to me about, again, it all comes back down to where our tax dollars are going. If we don't have enough money to make sure that we have healthcare facilities.
So with this, Dana? Okay.
Yeah. Are we there?
We're there.
We're there. Okay. It's not enough that they're taking our tax money and they're dispersing it out. It's not being evenly dispersed as far as how we collect it, because we're saying people who have 18-wheelers going over the road, spewing crap in the air, because all of us don't own 18-wheelers. Most of us are driving Priuses. But our tax dollars are not going in the direction that they need to be going in. And especially in the area that you're running in District 8, that seems how our tax dollars are spent, right? Is key to how you're communicating with that area. Talk about how you see that tax discussion, because I hate it when people say Democrats shouldn't talk about taxes. Please We pay them. We should definitely talk about them.
Right. Well, and the issue is from FDR to Eisenhower, there was always a 70% rich person tax. There always was. It wasn't until Reagan, right? I mean, being a teacher for high school, you understand that portion, right? It started with FDR when we were in the Great Depression, and they did a 70% tax, right? And it carried through Eisenhower, who was a Republican, and said, yes, rich people should pay more. So that part set aside, in this last bill that was put through Congress, they actually addressed that situation and where the tax dollars should go. One thing that I'm majorly concerned about in the 8th District is Sunrise Coal, right? Okay. I don't know if you've seen the Washington Post articles about Sunrise Coal. They're being watched because Scott Pruitt came to Indiana as the FDA head and lobbied the Indiana State House to give them their kickbacks, right? The $4 million that went to them. Well, in this last cycle, as a small business, Sunrise Coal got $10 million. $10 million. They're an essential service. They got a $10 million small business loan, right, to hold up their business. And then they ended up laying people off because no one's buying coal. And they do this all the time, right? They tell the Indiana State House that they're not going to lay people off. They take the $4 million and then they walk away and they cut budgets. And then they get big incentives to their CEOs. The issue is not, I mean, people are smart. The issues are not that tax breaks are going in. It's how CEOs are spending money. And it's not just with the coal industry. It's with every big company. We have the plans. We've had the plans. We've used the plans. The plans have worked over time. I mean, if we have to go back to what FDR did with the New Deal, let's go back to what FDR did with the New Deal so that people profit, not profiteers, right? You are not supposed to use taxes from the American people to get rich from the American people. America was not designed to steal from the poor and give to the rich. We are not. America was designed to be a level playing field so that everybody had the same rights, the same privileges through and through.
Well, but it just seems like the greedy people are taking over because we're not paying attention, right? We're not like, we got excited in 2008. Oh my God, Barack Obama, black man, black first lady, black family, black, all of that. And then in 2010, we didn't show up and we lost the House. We didn't show up like we were supposed to in 2012. Oh my God, we still got him. We reelected him. Woo, it's close. But we didn't show back up again in 14. And so they got the Senate, or they got the Senate in 18 or 12. But the point is that we focus so much in on the presidential race. We are not paying attention to these House races that you're running in and these Senate races, because that's where the bills are being passed. And we're not even going to talk about the judges that we've lost. We've lost judges for a lifetime, for a generation. Yeah. We've lost them. They're gone because they're appointed for life. We've lost those. They're gone. But we can still make changes in the Senate and in the House. And that's by paying attention to these races. Thomasina, talk to the people about why it's so important for them to not just focus in on the very top of the ticket, but these congressional races as well.
Right. So the House is of, by, and for the people. The House is the one who is the bearer of the purse per the Constitution, right? So if we don't pay attention to the House, we lose our behinds, is the nice way to say it. Mm-hmm. And it is so important to be a part of legislation from the bottom of the ballot to the top of the ballot. And I obviously have a bias, and I think that you should vote Democrat because I am one. But what is important is that you know where legislation is. When I ran for a state house seat, people were extremely confused and didn't really even know that the state house was different than Congress, right?
Okay.
Congress is a co-equal branch of government to the president. If you want change, pay attention to Congress. Vote your congressperson in. Vote for the one that you want in, because president cannot be reached. Congress has to come back and talk to the people.
Well, they're supposed to, now they're
Supposed to.
we know that there's a one guy in District 9 who never comes back home. Well, I'm sorry, he does go to Tennessee, so I guess he does go home.
Right. Well, the 8th district, ours lives in Washington and has never lived in Southern Indiana.
Really? So he doesn't even understand what the constituency.
He has an address.
Huh. Well, I know Congressman Carson comes home. The 7th district actually sees their congressperson. I mean, listen.
I've been to his karaoke parties.
Hello, and I'm hoping we have one, because I'm like, are we gonna have karaoke this year? I'm feeling some kind of way about that. This virus.
He's an amazing human.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, Thomasina, and then also talk about the fact that we only have around 23 to 24% of our elected officials are women. We have an opportunity, right? You and I were crunching the numbers the other day, because that's what we do. We crunch numbers. We're a little nerdy when it comes to this politics thing. And we were looking at the possibility of having a female in District 1. We will have a female in District 2 because the 2 women in the primary. 5 could possibly have a woman come out. 6 could possibly have a woman come out. 7, no.
Yep.
8 could have a woman. And no, 9. So that's 5 of the 9 seats, 5 of the congressional seats.
5.
We could have women on the ballot in the general election.
I mean, it's amazing to me. It's amazing to me. And some of these, a woman for the first time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not about, pun intended, trumping anybody, but what it is about is equal representation. By, through, and for the law, right? If over half of if 90% of our Congress people are men, right, and they've always been men, it's not really representing where we are as a
society.
Hoosier group, as a society, right? 53% of the electorate in the 8th is women. 53% of the electorate is female. So it would be nice to start to counterbalance the ideas, because I know from my perspective, especially being in emergency management, that it comes from a nurturing space, and you're not just thinking of the one thing, right? You're looking at it as the whole. So it's drastically important. Speaking of that, I'd like to say sincere condolences to Betty Cockrum and her family of her passing. She was an advocate for Planned Parenthood, president for Planned Parenthood for so many years. And my deepest condolences to her family and her friends in this time of loss to her.
Absolutely. And one of the other things that excites me is of the 5 women, there's a possibility that we could have at least 2 women of color, and we could have at least 2 women who make up members of the LGBTQ plus community. And just like we said before, representation matters. Thomasina, you sit on the board with me in Stonewall. You were at one point on the ballot to be the vice president of Stonewall. Then this congressional thing showed up. Talk about what it would mean to send an LGBTQ plus woman, because gay dudes, no offense, fellas, y'all doing all right. We got Tammy Baldwin, and we got some stuff, but talk about what it would mean to be an LGBTQ plus person on the ballot. If you and the woman that comes out of 2, at co-sharing that.
Pat Hackett.
Yeah, well, I know Pat Hackett. Come on, she was already on the show. One of my favorites.
I know.
But talk about the meaning behind having possibly 2 women who are members of the LGBTQ plus community on the ballot in November.
Right. So it was best said to me by Vi Simpson. Right. So when I was talking to Vi Simpson a couple of years ago, and we were doing a fundraiser together, she mentioned, when she first got in, right, there were all these plans being made about families for Indiana and how women who stayed home were not receiving benefit. And she was the only woman in the room, literally the only woman in the room. And had she not been there, things would not have been known, right?
Exactly.
Like, it's not known that when you have a job, you not only have to worry about childcare, you have to worry about feeding the kids, you have to worry about feeding the kids before and after school.
And don't forget
all of the things.
If you a dude, don't forget if you a dude, if your woman ain't home, the dishes might not get washed.
I know a lot of good guys out there that do dishes. So
well, I'm just thinking 45 was talking about,
the reality of it in the structure of the family at that time, right? The reality of it in the structure of the family at that time, they literally had no idea of all the extra things that you have to do, like getting school clothes and bathing kids after school, right? All of these extra things. Mm-hmm. Had she not been in the room, all of these extra things would not have been brought to their attention. This is what I'm talking about. If you haven't lived the life of any minority, then you cannot bring that voice to the table. Absolutely. And it's not just that. It's every individual in school, not just the little girls, but it's every individual that is in school right now being able to see that it's not just one type of individual that gets to Washington. Absolutely. Right? That their voice and that their consciousness is alive and that they do have the ability to do anything as an American.
You know what? I am going to push back just a little bit, and I want to say that I want us as women to stop referring to ourselves as minorities. Marginalized, yes. Minority, no. We are the majority in the nation. We are the majority in the state. It is time for us to start exercising the majority that we hold. Marginalized, hell yeah. I mean, the fact that there are no laws on the books that determine what a man can do with his body, but there are laws on the books to determine what a woman can do with her body is indicative of the fact that as women, we are not using our power. We are the majority. So I want to push back a little bit because although we are, as women, marginalized along with African Americans and the Latino community and the LGBTQ plus community and our Native American community and our Asian community, we are not the minority. And because of that compassion that you talked about and our ability to nurture, we can squash all of this nonsense and nobody can be marginalized because that's who we are now. I ain't gonna say all of us is like that. Because I'm going to bring up one person that you're going to have to deal with when you get to Washington until the end of this. Well, maybe not. Maybe we get rid of this clown in 2020. We got somebody else. Betsy DeVos. Betsy DeVos with her little, I don't even know. Some women, we just give over to the dudes and say, y'all can have them. We good. This is like Curtis Hill. He's not invited to the picnic. Curtis Hill ain't invited to the picnic, right? We can send Betsy DeVos off. She can have her whatever, because just last week after they passed the CARE Act saying, all these billions of dollars going to public education, outside of guidelines, she went on record saying, hey, but states, if you really want to funnel some of this money to private schools, feel free to do that. Luckily,
Jennifer McCormick
pushed back on that and said, nah, she's our superintendent of public education here in Indiana. She pushed back on that. But Betsy DeVos has been a bane to the existence of public education. And I saved this one towards the end of the interview because I know what education means to you. I know how important education is and how it has shaped and changed your life, right? Talk about when you get to Washington, how you are going to try to fix how the funding and the disbursement and all of she tried to defund special education. What kind of heartless...
be real. Are we really surprised with her heartlessness at this point?
Actually, I know she's got the more estrogen than she does testosterone, so I keep thinking the estrogen is going to kick in.
Right, but she's got more money than she has anything else.
Oh yeah.
Right, and it's about profit.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing that you brought up Dr. McCormick, because the largest contrast between Betsy DeVos and Dr. McCormick is the compassion, is the fact that Dr. McCormick made it a career to stand for children, right? And stand for their education, and do everything in her power to help out rural children in this unprecedented time. There is a stark difference between Betsy DeVos and Dr. McCormick. There are compassionate people that are in the Republican Party. Betsy DeVos is not one of them, right?
Well, and Dr. McCormick gives me hope, because I keep saying there's got to be some good Republicans somewhere. And you're right. She has been doing the right thing, the best she can, fighting her own.
We need those radical liberal Lincoln Republicans, because Lincoln was actually a radical liberal Republican, and we need those Republicans to step up at this time and say no more, and vote for me. But the point is that for public education is a must, right? And bringing it back to FDR and that New Deal, we were promised that our tax dollars would go to public education, because it should not matter what zip code you live in. You should be able to have the same education in every single zip code. Right now, we were promised 70% funding for Title I. My sister is a Title I teacher, Teresa Ball in Telceti.
They got a new mayor.
I know they do. Chris Kale, God love him. He's an amazing
LGBTQ+.
Yeah, so we were promised 70%. Right now, we're funded about 30%. So public schools are suffering just exponentially. Exponentially. I mean, and it's not just because of the legislation that has gone through the House in Indiana. It's because we've taken our eyes off the prize, right? And we've forgotten look at the nursing situation. There isn't even a school psychologist anymore. These are all things that were guaranteed in the New Deal that FDR did in 1930. 1930. You cannot tell me that our humanities stopped at Eisenhower. You can't. You cannot tell me that our humanities stopped at Eisenhower. What we need to do is do a New Deal, much like FDR, and bring back the funding for the things that are already there. Making sure that our children have a nurse in every single public school. What does that do for those public schools? It gives a person who lives there a job as a public servant in a school as a nurse, right? It keeps someone in that community that is linked to that community in that community. Not only that, but we could go on. We don't have enough time for what we can do for public education through this. I do have an initiative for teachers and buybacks for their scholarships and using it through state schools, like Indiana State University has an amazing teacher program. University of Evansville, and these are all universities that are in the 8th District. University of Evansville started off as a teaching college, right? Shout out to Robert Dion down there.
Board member, baby. Board member, Stonewall board member. And he had an interview the other day. I got to listen to it with IBJ. He did an interview about, when I remember, I'll tell you. Oh, the election. I think it was voting by mail or something. Anyway.
But we have those programs. I can't tell you how many teachers actually went to the Indiana State University in Terre Haute to get their teaching degree. I mean, these are important programs. This is what keeps our community as Hoosiers communities.
Yes.
We need to invest in our communities, and we can do it through federal funding, and we can do it through federal scholarship programs. We just need to expand it.
Absolutely. And so a lot of people think, okay, especially when they talk about, how we take care of, this debt that student loans have created, and people are always saying, oh my God, how are you going to pay for all of these things? And oh my God, we don't have them. Yes, actually we do. We have the money to do any and everything that we want to do. It's just how and that's why I want to go back to it, because I know in a district like District 8, you and I are on the correct side of social issues up and down the ballot, right? Social issues me and you got. The concern isn't the concern when you're in a District 8. We got to talk about the things that matter to the people in District 8. And the folks in District 8 you have counties in District 8 who are going to be losing population. They're going to be some of the counties that are losing population. And when you lose...
Probably going to get bigger.
Well, District 8 will get bigger, but you have counties. Yes. Counties that are going to be losing revenue because they're going to be losing... People don't want to stay. There's a brain drain. Right? So, and if they're not there making money, it makes it much more difficult for those municipalities. Talk about how, not just with public education, but how you want to infuse District 88 with job opportunities.
Yeah, so one of the big things that I also looked at with Dr. Turner in the rural healthcare program is not only expanding the scholarships and residency programs for rural initiatives, but also expanding that to CNAs and PAs, physician's assistants, and NPs, because the majority of our healthcare that's available in our regular doctor's office, so to speak, are NPs in rural areas. So, and the issue is especially since, I mean, we haven't had enough nurses and EMTs and paramedics in Indiana for the last 15 years. We've just never had enough. So there are hundreds of programs that we can give so that people don't have to pay for that school and they can be a service to that community. There are clinics that we can set up that would help train those students. And furthermore, if you become an MP or a nurse with a master's degree even, and you want to go to teaching, you have to, you not only take a pay cut to be a teacher, but you still have to work extra hours to keep your nursing license. I mean, it's a horrible situation. So we need to make sure that those teachers that have gone to extra school to get those master's degrees, have them taken care of so that we have the teachers to teach the nurses, right? So that they're not having to worry about feeding their family and paying $1,000 a month in student debt because they are such servants to the community. But there are hundreds of ways that we could both employ people in those areas, right? Because you want paramedics and you want EMTs who are in that area. Because if you're working in rural southern Indiana and somebody says, well, I live on Starlight Drive, or even if it's an older family and they say, I live on rural route 2 box 224. Well, that's an old system that's no longer the 911 system. But if you live there, you know where rural route 2 is, or you know where 700 North is, right? You can't hear me?
I know, I can hear you. I just don't know what that is.
You don't know what that is. Okay.
I've been there, but
right. So I mean, but we need people in that culture that speak that language, right? And in order to do that, we have to do it with our teachers. We have to do it with our nurses. We have to do it with our EMTs. We have to do it with the CNAs that serve the people in the retirement homes. And we have to have those opportunities available, because it's not that people can't pass the test or any of the other memes that go about. The issue is that they are not paid to take these classes, that they have huge debt when they come out. But we need to be able to serve the rural populations with the people who live there in order to keep the people who live there and get them the education and certification that is required of that position.
You know, I don't know. You said something a little while ago. I mean, first of all, I love that you have plans, because that's important. Because when you get to Washington, you got to have a plan and you got to be able to build those coalitions. And I think if you're able to resonate in District 8, I'm not worried about you being able to, work across the aisle. That's not something I'm ever worried about, right? But you said something a little while ago that said, you said, I don't believe that we lost our humanity after Eisenhower. I don't know, Thomasina. It seems like we forgot some things, because we still have separated family on the border. Again, another issue that you are going to have to deal with when you get to Washington is immigration and how we are inhumanely treating people who are just seeking asylum. And because of all this COVID, right, ain't nobody talking about it. Ain't nobody mentioning it. Ain't nobody saying nothing. But I had a guest on from Texas because I wanted to find out what's going on down the border with this crisis. Talk about how we deal with our immigration, our dreamers, and how we get these babies out of cages, man.
If I talk too much about that, I'm gonna have to peace out, because I'll break down. It is. We are not an inhumane nation. We're not. Send me. You're tired. You're poor. Your huddle mass is yearning to breathe free. Send these, the homeless tempest tossed to thee. I left my lamp beside the golden door. Every child who is an immigrant or is a grandchild or child of an immigrant knows that poem. I am one of those. My grandfather and grandmother came over on my father's side. We are a nation that is made of immigrants. Made of immigrants. We should commit safely. We should welcome it with documentation. And we should take care of those children who came here and who have only known the United States as their home. These are things that we need to do. We do not need to isolate people. In fact, there is a program in San Antonio and there's a program in El Paso, Texas, which is a documentation. And they have a 100% success rate. 100% success rate. And you come in, you fill out your paperwork, you give adequate information, and you are required to check back once a week. And when these people are allowed the freedom, right, when our brothers and sisters who are seeking asylum that really want it, I mean, come on, Dana, let me ask you something. If you're starving and if you're worried that your children are going to stay alive, do you think people are not going to apply? They're not going to reply to this? We can do this. We can. Our brothers and sisters are asking for assistance. We did not give assistance in World War II, and look what happened. All right?
And it's almost like we turned into the people that we should. It's almost like we turned into the regime of who were.
I wouldn't go that. Right. I wouldn't go that far.
I said almost, but you know, it starts with a few. It starts with a few. And listen, Thomasina, I'm not trying to say that our system of government and the people in America are not quality people, because we know the majority are. It's only about maybe 25% of the people that are running around who think this is a white nation, who think that anybody that was not born here is not acceptable unless they come from another European nation.
Right.
There's only about 25% of the people who feel like, you know, they can overthrow the government anytime they want to, even if the government is trying to protect their dumb asses with carrying guns and whatnot. And I'm not, your optimism, I was telling Nicole Bolden, you know, Bloomington Clerk, I said, after you talk to Thomasina, if you don't believe things can change, you need to check your pulse. But I'm talking to you as a quadruple minority. A quadruple marginalized individual. Because, you know, us left-handed people are marginalized too. But
it's all about the notebook.
Yeah, but see, here's the deal. We've got people who are in marginalized communities talking about they're not going to vote. They're not going to get involved. They witness armed citizens go to the Michigan State House, and Michigan like, look, we're not going to have legislation because these armed people are showing up and they making me nervous. But if it was some black folk, there'd be some police there. Or if it was some Hispanic folk, there'd be some police there. And they're seeing our country behave in a way, but it ain't nothing new, Thomasina. And that's the part that we have to, again, when I talk to you, I feel like America could do anything. And when we see those children on the border, and we find, you know, we still know that there's over 3,500 families that are still separated. What are you going to work on in Washington when you are sent there in November to try to help solve this problem? I know I put you on the spot, didn't I? My bad.
Right. So, along with Andre Carson, right, and Pat Hackett, we will devise plans that ease that reign, right? And I can't say enough. America is known for the Statue of Liberty. It's known for some
Americans. For some Americans. Some of us came under the boat and were dropped off, you know, south of the Mason-Dixon line in chains. So it's not necessarily, you know, but how do we fix it all?
The hope of America. The hope of America lies in her torch. The hope of America lies in her torch, right? In her sovereignty, in her ability to put her arms around those in need. And not just here at home, but what we have done for other nations. I'm telling you right now, if we don't get that situation fixed by the 22nd of January, I will be in Texas sitting in until they decide to fix it.
That's what's up. And that's what
that's who I am.
But see, that's what we need. And I knew that, I mean, listen, I'm not trying to put you on the spot or nothing like that, but I think what people miss when we have a bunch of elected officials, we don't have elected leaders. And we need more leaders such as yourself who understand the importance of standing up for the people. You know, that's what our government is. It's a citizen government. And we have relinquished ourselves because we are concentrating on keeping the mortgage. We're concentrating on getting our kids some shoes. I mean, legitimate reasons, absolutely. But I also know that we are an intelligent species and we can do more than one thing at a time. And paying attention to our government is one of those things that we are, I don't know if you hear it in me, it's one of those things that we're supposed to be paying attention to. And unfortunately, because we have not been.
I can't, as a Christian, sleep at night.
Hello.
Knowing that there are children that are separated from their mothers.
Isn't that
fathers.
crazy? But it's not. See, that's the thing. That's the part that's killing me, Thomasina. This ain't the first time we've seen this. Why do we know our history? We've seen our history. But why do we keep repeating it? We saw the devastation to the Native American community when we were having the assimilation schools. We saw the devastation to our Japanese Americans who were separated in internment camps and all of their properties were stolen. We've seen this before. Why are we allowing it to happen? You the psychologist, the clinical, help me. Could you diagnose America for me, please?
There is no, and the issue is that there is no justification for it.
Right.
Period.
Right.
End of story. Period. End of story. And the issue is currently, especially with COVID going on, it makes it easier for bad people in power to do bad things.
Absolutely.
It really does. And that's across the board. You know, whether we're denying the African American community better health care, right? Or the fact that in our urban areas, especially in the Chicago areas, that there aren't enough healthcare, places, and the African American family has been hit harder, right? In more affluent areas, we have more hospitals because, quite honestly, there's more elective things that can be paid for. If we had universal health care, then we wouldn't have those situations and we'd have more healthcare available to people. It's the same thing that's going on in rural areas. The population isn't as high, so we feel that there shouldn't be 5 hospitals within an hour of your house, right? But there's 5 hospitals within 10 minutes of your house if you live in Carmel because the population's higher and more people can pay for more elective services.
But see, and I think people get caught up. I'm sorry. But I think people get caught up because when they think of hospitals, they think of these big acreages of campuses. When your population is smaller, you don't need a super large footprint. You just need the services. And I think that's where people
We don't even have a pediatrician. We don't even have a pediatrician within 3 counties because there's not enough babies that are being born. So how do we fix those specialties, right?
Absolutely.
How do we fix those specialties for the populations when the populations are lower? And how do we support through government programs that will help those areas, right?
Yes.
There is so much discourse that has been happened, when an emergency comes about, right? I've been trained in mass casualty. And one of the first things you do on a mass casualty is you walk up to that mass casualty and you scream out loud, if anybody can hear me, please motion with your hand or move toward me if you can. And that gets the mass majority of people who are still healthy and able to walk towards a bus so we can go get them health care. And then you start dealing with those who are deceased and those who need help. And it's called start triage, right? So this is where we are in America. We have to shout out. If you need assistance, walk toward me. And it's not about your political party stance. This is about real life. This is about the loss of jobs. This is about Americans showing up for America. And she needs us. And I need every single one of you. If you are 18 or above, you need to get out and vote because we need that now. I'm calling you. If you can hear me and you can walk toward me, go out and vote.
Thomasina Marsili, I'm telling you, girl, one of the joys of the life that I live is the opportunity to meet people I probably wouldn't have never met. We both have been in Indiana our entire lives. I got a few years on you, but we would have never.
Couple, too.
I don't know. I'll be 50 this year. What you sitting on? 44, 45?
44.
Oh, I got 6. but one of the things that's amazing is I wouldn't have, if I hadn't gotten involved in politics and gotten involved in what it is to represent people and try to be a voice for people, I would have missed out on meeting someone who was as passionate about taking care of people as I am. You know, I went to a therapist and, I was rapping about, how I, was the caregiver of my mother and I was a caregiver of my father until they both passed away. And then she says, well, do you see this work that you're doing as being a caregiver to the state, to Hoosiers? And when she said that to me, it kind of put everything in perspective for me personally. Yeah. And a lot of what she was saying to me about me, I can reference to you. And I mean that with a lot of love and with a lot of sincerity, because I don't know very many people who are as passionate about saving and improving lives as you are, Thomas. It's the point where you do things I can't do. Blood just. We're not doing that. We're not doing.
I've been in some pretty.
I know you have. I know, situations. But we need, doggone it, Indiana. We need people who understand the plight of other people. Thomasina is not a black person. She has not walked in the shoes of a black person. But guess what? She articulated what some of our needs are. She is not an immigrant on the border. She's not had her children separated from her for trying to seek asylum, but she can articulate exactly what needs to happen down there. And these are the kind of people we need to vote for. Y'all can sit around and cry about, or they can't win, she can't win, whatever. I want y'all to understand.
Numbers don't say that.
Exactly. Well, people, I know, again, like I said, if anybody finishes talking to Thomasina and they don't realize that anything is possible, they need to check their pulse. All right? And I'm just trying to give you a plug the best way I can without actually endorsing you, because you have primary opponents and I work on the Central Committee and I got to stay neutral. But you're my friend. And I think people just are missing the boat on the quality of people we need to be sending to Washington. And the fact that you're running...
We need intelligence. We need intelligence. And not just book smarts. That it isn't even that. It's sense, the everyday.
Baby. Common sense. The little things that matter. Tell people where they can find you, Thomasina, so they can donate to your campaign, volunteer to make phone calls. I don't know if people can see that, boo.
Yeah, it's backwards. It's backwards.
No, not for us.
www.hope, HOPEIN, 8.com. That's hopein8.com. You can also find me at hopein8 on Facebook, and there's a link there to the website.
You are one of my favorite candidates. You were one of my favorite candidates 2 years ago when you ran in the House. I'm glad that you are not giving up. You are a true leader in our state. You are a motivator. You are a true leader in our party. I know that, it's not, for you running in 8 is you want to connect beyond party lines. But like you said, it's a great day to be a Democrat. And you bring hope and inspiration to a state where sometimes we feel like we're at loss. And that's why I wanted to just kind of, sometimes you got to rev the engine up a little bit so I can, so that people can really see who you are. So that's what I was,
I'm telling you, you can't make $1 out of 15 cents, but you can hope and try. And you make plans to get that $1, right? And just because you're down does not mean you're out. Just because we have not succeeded previously does not mean that our hearts aren't calling to other Hoosiers. This is about Indiana. This is about change. And we need that in Washington now more than ever. I love every single one of you. I love every single one of you. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, my girl. And I'm sorry for the little, the network issues earlier, but it worked out in the end. Everybody get to see everything. They can see the hope in it. Indiana's own Dana Black, Turn Left. Man, I was excited about this interview. Been excited. I asked her, before we went on COVID, was she gonna come up to Indy? She's like, Dana, I can't come to Indy. I gotta be in my district working. I was like, all right. Now
18 counties, baby.
Right. Now that we're remote, I was able to bring her on the show because I believe her voice is powerful and is way too important. Make sure you guys support Thomasina. If she speaks to your needs, I'm not telling you what to do. I can't endorse, but she is definitely one of those that we want to send to Washington who are looking out for all humans, all Americans, and all Hoosiers. Indiana's own Dana Black, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to have a couple of more guests for you on Thursday. I'm hyped and ready to make some change. I hope you are. Thomasina got me ready to go. I'm ready to go. All right, hey, before I go, send us out of here with something. Go on, give us something.
Oh, money, you got lots of friends traveling around the door, but when it's gone and I don't spend an ounce, they won't come around no more. Which relations give crust of bread and such. You can help yourself, but don't ever take too much. Now mama may have, papa may have, but God bless that child that's got his own. That's got his own.
Yo, you been hanging out with Nancy Wilson? What's up? Thomasina Marsili, running in District 8, Hope at 8. Thank you so much for tuning in. And you got a little serenade. Last time she serenaded, she gave us a little something again. Indiana's own Dana Black, Turn Left. We are bringing you the candidates from across the state who want to represent you, talking about Indiana politics from the left side of things. I will holler at y'all on Thursday. Peace.